Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and in today's video, we're going to be taking a look at a brand new Pokemon in the world of Pokemon Go, Palossand. Palossand is a ground and ghost type Pokemon with the moveset of Mudshot, and your choice of Sand Tomb, Earth Power, and Shadow Ball. Palossand evolves from a Sandygast, which can be found in raids or through research tasks. Now, based on the typing and coverage, it does have interesting potential as a MEDICHAM+STEEL core breaker, but of course, the weakness to Knockdown is a bit concerning. So without further ado, let's hop into the matches and test out Palossand in action in the Great League. Hopping into the first match, picking up a tough lead, Umbreon into Medicham. I'm going to save switch into Frostlass, opponent staying in. I'm expecting a catch onto Knockdown, so I go for the Avalanche bait, but my opponent catches onto Dewgong, and that is absolutely awful for me. I'm going to fire off a Shadow Ball with the Frostlass. This will not be lethal, but it will get the Dewgong quite low. Dewgong is going to commit a shield, as they really like that alignment and they want to keep it. At this point, I've baited out the Ice type, so that way Palossand doesn't have to see it, and I've grabbed the shield advantage. So I'm perfectly content with just letting the Frostlass go, and trusting in Palossand up a shield to help sweep in the endgame. Shadow Ball is going to land on the CMP tie. They can KO my Frostlass here, which is perfectly fine. I'm going to immediately send back in the Umbreon. Umbreon will be able to outpace, make the foul play, and foul play will be lethal. So I've gotten rid of the Dewgong. My opponent does have energy on the Medi, so I'm actually going to stay in here with the Umbreon because I want them to throw their energy into the Umbreon before I send in Palossand. They go for Ice Punch number 1 and Ice Punch number 2. This is perfect. Now I can send in the Palossand, and let's see what they have in the back. In comes Palossand in the back. My opponent has a Alolan Sandslash. Sandslash hitting for super effective damage with both the Shadow Claws and the Ice Punch. I will commit the shield, and I'm going for the Sand Tomb bait here. I need to try and generate some kind of advantage. Sand Tomb gets the shield. Now they are debuffed, and I should be in a winning position. I'm going to commit the shield, and I should be able to overfarm quite a bit of energy here, and then go for the Shadow Ball just before they make the killing Ice Punch. This Shadow Ball is going to KO the Alolan Sandslash. Back in comes the Medicham, and Palossand makes it to the Shadow Ball. Shadow Ball takes out the Medi, and that is a good game. We see a great lead in the next match, Umbreon into Sableye. This is exactly where I want to see Sableye on the team. Opponent save switches into a Wall Rain, and honestly, this is a bit awkward for me. My backline does not do great into Wall Rain, so I'm going to need to get some chip damage with the Umbreon before I eventually send in Frostlass. I don't want to stay in and let them just KO the Umbreon, because then I get swept by Sableye in the back. They're going to go for the Icicle Spear. I'm farming up. I do not make the other foul play, as they're going to fire off a charge move. I'm just going to save this energy and instead send in Frostlass. Frostlass looking to farm up quite a bit of energy here. They do make an Earthquake, so I will respect it with a shield. I do want to try and keep my Frostlass healthy if at all possible. And now, since they went straight for the Quake, I can massively overfarm with the Frostlass and go for the killing shot with the Shadow Ball. Opponent commits the shield. Wall Rain is going to lose CMP to the Frostlass. That is massive. Shadow Ball KOs the Wall Rain. Back in comes the Sableye. Sableye will be hit with the Avalanche. I just want to try and get some damage here. Avalanche will not KO, but it will get the Sableye low. Now I can combo play back into the Umbreon and put pressure on the final shield with a foul play. Opponent commits the shield in the back. They have Medicham. I'm going for the foul play here because I'm hoping that I will be able to live 3 counters and make another one. But as you're going to see, the counters do KO, and I do not get the move. I send in Frostlass just to force my opponent to throw energy here. My opponent fires off the power-up punch. I'm looking for the Avalanche. Opponent does not want to let that happen. They're firing off another power-up punch. Power-up punch is going to KO the Frostlass. In comes Palossand. Palossand farming up. Opponent is running power-up punch and psychic, so they cannot make the charge move. Shadow Ball will KO. Back in comes the Sableye. Sableye has a ton of energy. The question is, are they at the back-to-back here? If they are, I might lose. And my opponent is not. Palossand at the Sand Tomb, taking down the Sableye and securing the win. We see a familiar lead in the next match, Umbreon into Medicham. I swear, felt like 50% of leads during these sets were Medicham. I save switch into Frostlass, my opponent staying in here, and then they send in a Leafage Lurantis, so my opponent core broke into shreds by Frostlass. Avalanche will get rid of the Lurantis, and odds are they could have something like a Knockdown in the back as their third. They're firing off a charge move here. Psychic will do quite a lot of damage to the Frostlass. The Frostlass is able to hang on and make the Shadow Ball. This should be forcing a shield, and with shield advantage, you already know it is Palossand time. In comes the Palossand. I still don't know what my opponent has in the back. Could be the Noctowl, but in case it's a Steel type, I will commit the shield. They go for the Ice Punch. In the back, it is the Noctowl, and now it's time for Umbreon to shine. We have the battle of neutral tanks, Umbreon versus Noctowl. Noctowl strikes first with a Sky Attack. Umbreon is going to shrug that damage off like it's nothing and return fire with the Foul Play. Foul Play is going to connect onto the Noctowl. Noctowl continues to farm. They're going for Sky Attack number 2. My opponent hasn't shielded yet, and I haven't either. I'm going to tank the Sky Attack because I know I can reliably take that damage and then go for the Foul Play. Foul Play is going to be getting that Noctowl quite low, continuing to farm with the Umbreon. It's another Sky Attack. They tried to go for CMP. I will commit the shield. Their switch timer's up. In comes the Medicham, and I'm going to send in Palossand. Palossand firing off the Shadow Ball into the Medicham. Shadow Ball is going to be shielded by the Medicham. Medicham trying to land the Ice Punch. Ice Punch does hit for super effective damage, but it will not KO, and now I should be able to overfarm. I'm going to overfarm and fire off the Shadow Ball again. This will be lethal to the Medicham, but my problem is there's a Noctowl coming back in here, and they double resist both of my charge moves. I'm going for the Shadow Ball here, hoping it's going to be enough to KO. Shadow Ball does not KO. It's a race. Palossand mud shots down the Noctowl, and that is a good game. We've got a Core Breaker on the lead in the next match. Umbreon into Shadow Alolan Ninetales. It is a Powder Snow Alolan Ninetales, so I'm going to stay in here with the Umbreon and go for the Last Resort. This does not do a ton, but it will be some valuable chip damage. My opponent shields, and with a shield advantage, I feel confident safe switching into Frostlass. They're at 100 energy here. I'm confident they're baiting. My opponent does go for the Weather Ball bait, and interestingly enough, they go for another Weather Ball after that. That cannot be the Dazzling Gleam. So they go for 2 Weather Balls, and then they're just going to send in Skarmory. So it looks like my opponent is just trying to get some chip damage after the failed bait, and then farm down with the Skarmory. The issue with that plan is Frostlass is absolutely loaded on energy, making another Avalanche, getting a shield from my opponent, and now I have a 2-0 shield advantage and a very healthy Umbreon, so I can afford to tank whatever the Skarmory throws here. Skarmory will play to the CMP tie. Even if it's the Brave Bird, I do survive it. Umbreon able to tank the Brave Bird, not even in the red health, and going to fire off the Foul Play. Foul Play will be lethal. What is my opponent going to send in? They send in a Azumarill. I'm going to bring in Palossand. Back in comes the Shadow Ninetales. Ninetales going for the Weather Ball. I have to Shadow Ball immediately. I need to get rid of the Ninetales, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. Firing off the Shadow Ball here, getting rid of the Ninetales before they can burn my final shield. Back in comes the Azumarill. I cannot make the double Shadow Ball before they make it to 2 charge moves, so I'm going to go for the Sand Tomb into the Shadow Ball to get them low. Sand Tomb is going to connect. I make it to the Shadow Ball on the CMP tie, and that's game over, as Shadow Ball will get them low, and from here, I just no shield, because I can make the Last Resort on my Umbreon. They undercharge the Ice Beam, looking for a farm down, but I'm not going to let that happen. I send in the Umbreon, lose CMP on the Last Resort, but since I saved my shield from earlier, I can shield the Ice Beam and go for the Last Resort. Last Resort, not the strongest move ever, but they're debuffed, and Umbreon gets the win. Moving into the next match, leading Umbreon into, you guessed it, yet another Medicham. As always, I'm going to save switch into Frostlass, being very wary of a catch, as before I did have my move caught. They're firing off a charge move. I will commit the shield, and then I'm just going to undertap the Shadow Ball, and my opponent is going to send in Dugong. Good news is, I actually needed to Shadow Ball the Dugong, so I was able to throw the correct charge move this time, as this opponent does not get a catch. I'm firing off another Shadow Ball here. Shadow Ball will be lethal to the Dugong, so my opponent is going to commit the shield. Our switch timers are slightly desynced, and I do want to try and take advantage of that. Drill Run will connect. I'm hoping to catch the move back onto the Umbreon, but my switch clock, which is the half second from being up, so I'm not able to make the catch. I'll save energy for later and send back in the Umbreon. Umbreon is going to fire off the Foul Play. Foul Play, not going to be enough to KO the Dugong here. Foul Play connects. My opponent banks a move for later, and they're going to send in Medicham. Medicham will be greeted with a foul play from Umbreon. Foul play will get some nice chip damage, and now we find out what is the second charge move on the Medicham. We've seen the Psychic, and it's a power-up punch Medicham. Not what I was hoping to see. Now they just get to buff up their attack more and more and more. Power punch number 2 lands. They are now 2 stages boosted. I'm going to go for the foul play, and again, take advantage of the desync switch timers. Foul play connects. I send in Palossand. Palossand looking for the mud shot down, and they do not make the Psychic. That is massive. I leave with energy. We'll have to see what do they have in the back. But first, back in comes the Dugong. Dugong will debuff me with an Icy Wind. Their final Pokemon is revealed to be Galarian Stunfisk. Okay, this is typically a good matchup for Palossand, but I am debuffed. So I'm going to Sand Tomb them, so that way I do normal damage, and I'm firing off the Shadow Ball here. Shadow Ball will not be lethal, but it will deal some solid chip damage onto the Stunfisk. Stunfisk massively over-farming here, and they play to a CMP Tide that they do not win. Palossand, Sand Tomb, gets the Stunfisk low. Stunfisk does have a Rock Slide banked after they KO here. So I'm going to send in the Umbreon to absorb the energy and trust in Frostlass to end this game. Rock Slide will KO. In comes the Frostlass. Opponent sends in the Dugong. Frostlass gets the farm down, and I have the double avalanches. The question is, do I survive the mud shot from the G-Fisk? Avalanche gets the shield, and I get Avalanche number 2. Let's go. Frostlass with 1 HP KOs the Stunfisk as the timer counts down. We've got a neutral lead in the next match, Umbreon into Swampert. I do need to stay in this matchup because Swampert does extremely well versus Palossand. So I just need to get rid of the Swampert and then hope that my back line can do well into theirs. Foul play is going to connect. My opponent has farmed up quite a bit of energy here, and they're going to return fire with the Hydro Cannon. 3 Hydro Cannons comes very close to KOing Umbreon, and unfortunately they do get there before I make a third foul play. So I'm able to get them very low, but my opponent will be able to make it to 2 more Hydro Cannons here and just about KO the Umbreon. As you can see, I am going to get outpaced. This will leave me with a sliver of HP, so I decide to be aggressive. I'm going to send in Frostlass and get the farm down. Frostlass will be met with a Alolan Sandslash. Thank goodness it's running Powder Snow, but still not a great spot for me to be in. I fire off the Shadow Ball. That will be shielded by my opponent. And Drill Run, while non-lethal, will still add up quite a bit, so I will commit the shield on the Drill Run. Farming up with the Frostlass and forcing the CMP tie here. Shadow Ball, not going to be lethal. My opponent is going to let that through, and now I've gotten the Sandslash quite low. I will expend the final shield. I want to try and get rid of the Sandslash if at all possible. Farming up here, and unfortunately, they do get to the 3rd Drill Run 1 sooner. I wasn't 100% on my counts there. I was hoping to switch. I'm going to send in Palossand and get the farm down, but by not getting the catch on Umbreon, I'm now in a very tough spot as it's Noctowl in the back. I fire off the Sand Tomb on the CMP tie to the Shadow Ball here. Sand Tomb will be no shielded. The question is, can I make it to double Avalanche on the Frostlass? This will be extremely close. In comes the Frostlass. Frostlass makes it to the double Avalanche, but I think the Wing Attack is going to KO. Avalanche number 1 gets the shield. The Wing Attack KOs, and Noctowl gets the farm down. Hopping into the final match, sending Umbreon into Noctowl. Considering that Noctowl is an absolute wall to my Palossand in the back, I'm going to be staying in this matchup and just doing my best to get rid of the Noctowl. I farm up to the back-to-back foul plays, and I'm going to strike first in this matchup. Noctowl can very comfortably tank multiple foul plays, and they're going to return fire with the Sky Attack. The nice thing is, I can comfortably tank quite a few Sky Attacks as well. We've seen this matchup play out, and it's a pretty solid one all across the board. I'm firing off the foul play. Foul play will be no shielded by the Noctowl. My opponent tries to go for the CMP tie, and I end up going for the extra. Now here, I actually did get a little bit distracted, so I throw 1, and the last resort, not noticing they had switched into the Galarian Stunfisk. Just a misplay by me. I'll be honest, I wasn't paying full attention there. I got distracted. I'm going to fire off a Sand Tomb as they make it to the Earthquake. Sand Tomb is going to connect onto that Stunfisk, and I do tank an Earthquake here, so I am going to let this through. My opponent baits with a Rock Slide. That is incredible for me. I can farm up, fire off the Shadow Ball on the CMP tie to the Earthquake, and this will KO. Shadow Ball is going to KO the Stunfisk. My opponent can send back in the Noctowl, and that's exactly what they're going to do. Noctowl will be able to fire off a Shadow Ball and just get rid of the Palossand. I'm going to send back in Umbreon. Umbreon just going for the foul play as soon as I get it. It was on alignment, but I'm just looking to put pressure on the shield. I get the shield, and that's honestly all I was after. I'm just going to let the Umbreon go and trust in Frostlass to win this game. In comes Frostlass with the shield advantage. In the back, my opponent has Swampert. I'm farming up, and I'm firing off the Avalanche here. Even if my opponent no-shields this will do so much damage that I can now threaten to farm down. Their win con is going for the Earthquake, so I will shield the first. They do just go for the Hydro. They're going for Hydro number 2, and that's perfectly fine. I tanked the Hydro Cannon here, so I will be able to survive that. I am in the red, but I should still be okay here. In comes the Noctowl. Noctowl is going to make the last second charge move. I commit the shield with the Frostlass. Frostlass farms down the Noctowl, and that's game over. And now some final thoughts on Palossand and its place in the Great League meta. First off, I love the typing. Ground plus Ghost is a terrific combination, allowing Palossand to core break Medicham plus Steel teams, and as we know, after the Season 15 balance patch, Medicham is absolutely everywhere. This is not a unique typing, however, we have seen this typing before with Runerigus, and Runerigus does have a better fast move with Shadow Claw being better than Mudshot, and it also has the better stat product, with Runerigus having the edge in terms of bulk. So while I do quite like both Palossand and Runerigus as Pokemon, they both fall into the same pitfall, which is unfortunately, they do not do well versus Noctowl, and Noctowl is ever present in the meta. So with a potential meta shift, we could see Palossand come to relevance, but for now, unfortunately, it a bit suffers the same irrelevance that Runerigus does as well. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you're enjoying the content, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And a special thank you as always to our members here on YouTube. The support you guys provide is absolutely incredible. So thank you guys oh so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.